If you're a new IB teacher heading into your first exam season, you have probably already seen it. Students emailing you late at night with last-minute requests, the level of anxiety perhaps starting to rise, and quite understandably, you want to help. And the most obvious response is to offer more revision time, more exam papers, more content. And although these may sound helpful, research tells us that actually it is not the most effective way to support your students through what they are going through. There is something else at work, something that sits right inside the IB's own ATL framework. And once you understand it, supporting students through exam pressure is going to be much more effective. In this video, I want to talk to you about one of the most useful research-backed ideas for exam season, and it connects directly to the IB ATL's framework, the self-management cluster. By the end of these few minutes, you will understand three things clearly. First, the concept that most teachers confuse with resilience and why the distinction matters in practice. Second, the 5 research-backed factors that actually help students cope with academic pressure. And finally, 3 practical strategies that you can use in your classroom this week without adding to your workload. Let's start with the misconception. In education, we talk a lot about resilience, and resilience does matter. However, in psychology, resilience refers to coping with long-term, serious adversity, for instance, trauma, chronic hardship, or a major life disruption. And if you think about it, that is not what our students, and diploma students in particular, are going through during exam season. The pressure they are feeling requires what researchers call academic buoyancy, the ability to deal with the everyday challenges and the setbacks that are typical of ordinary school life. For instance, a disappointing exam result, or a feedback that feels a bit harsh, or perhaps deadlines for 3 subjects colliding in the same week. And this distinction is very important because when we understand academic buoyancy, we stop treating every single moment of academic stress like a crisis, and we start teaching students how to recover quickly from what is normal academic difficulty. We stop trying to protect our students from pressure, and instead we start building their capacity to move through it. And this maps directly onto something the IB already expects you to develop. Inside the ATL Self-Management Skills category, there is a small subset called Affective Skills. The IB describes these as skills that relate to managing students' emotional state. For instance, helping them minimize stress and anxiety, and also helping them maintain a positive mindset. These are not well-being extras or a pastoral add-on. The IB is very explicit that these are skills that can be learned, that can be taught, and we as teachers are expected to develop them intentionally in our lessons. Supporting student well-being during exam season is not about running separate programs or referring your students to the school counselor. It is about small, deliberate classroom behaviors that you can build in your lessons and that will support developing your students' emotional regulation. This is where the research becomes very practical, because academic buoyancy is not just a vague quality that some students happen to have. It is actually built from 5 specific measurable factors, and they are known as the 5 C's: confidence, composure, coordination, commitment, and control. And together, these 5 factors account for more than half of the changes in academic buoyancy that students experience across a school year. And this is really important because it means that these are not fixed personality traits. They are responsive to what happens in the classroom. Confidence means self-efficacy, the belief that effort leads to improvement. Not just blind optimism, but a genuine belief that if I work at this, I can make progress. Composure is the ability to manage anxiety. Research identifies anxiety as the single strongest predictor of low academic buoyancy more than any other factor. Coordination is all about planning and structure. Students with a clear, manageable plan feel a greater sense of control, and control directly reduces anxiety. Commitment is persistence, the willingness to stay engaged even when motivation dips, and it will dip. That's normal. Control is the sense that outcomes are not random, that what a student does actually matters. Students who feel helpless disengage. Students with a strong sense of agency stay in the work. You do not build these qualities, these 5 C's, through motivational speeches. You build them through small, consistent classroom habits. And here are 3 that are especially powerful right now. Many students hold one quiet belief that struggling or having a setback means that they're failing. And once they start believing that, motivation collapses. And this happens silently, which is why you need to address it out loud in the classroom. The most powerful thing you can do for your students is to model recovery. Share a moment when motivation dipped for you, or a time when feedback was hard to hear, or when something you worked on didn't go according to plan, and what you did next. Then ask your students a simple reflection question. What is one challenge you have faced this week or this term, and what did you learn from it? 5 minutes, that's all it takes. But this directly builds confidence and composure, 2 of the strongest C's in the Buoyancy framework. Students usually enter exam season with a very well-intentioned plan, but actually very vague. Study more. Vague plans create anxiety. What creates calm is having a structure. You don't need to become a study coach, but spending 10 minutes with your students helping them build a simple revision structure can dramatically increase their sense of control. Guide the students to list their exam dates and work backwards. Break revision into small, daily, specific tasks rather than just one long, undifferentiated study block. And very important, get your students to schedule their breaks. This is not indulgent, it is actually strategic. Students who plan rest are more likely to sustain effort than those who schedule wall-to-wall revision and then feel guilty when they cannot maintain it. Students with structured plans consistently show higher coordination and control, 2 of the most actionable C's you can develop in your classroom this week. Students cannot regulate the stress they never acknowledge, and yet many classrooms move straight into content without ever creating space for students to notice what they're carrying. At the start of a lesson, simply ask, on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling about exams today? Or give me a word that describes where you are with exam pressure today. Just 2 minutes. Students recognize their emotional state, and naming it is the first step in managing it. You might follow this with 2 or 3 slow, deliberate breaths before moving into content. Research on emotional regulation is very clear. Students who can acknowledge and regulate their emotional state show measurably improved focus and information retention. The IB's Affective Skill cluster describes this as developing the ability to manage your own emotional state in order to learn. And this is exactly that. In practice, in your classroom, and in just 2 minutes. When you develop affective skills alongside your subject content, you are teaching the conditions that allow learning to happen. And that principle applies across every subject, every program, and every student in your class. Developing that ability, that buoyancy, can be done through 3 simple classroom strategies. First of all, normalize setbacks out loud and intentionally. Secondly, give students a revision structure and make sure it includes rest time. Third, run briefly regular emotional check-ins. If you want one thing to try this week, start with this. Open your next lesson with a 2-minute stress check-in. It is one of the simplest and most evidence-supported things any teacher can do to strengthen both learning and well-being, particularly at exam time. I will leave links to some useful documents in the description so you can go deeper if you would like to. Let me know how you get on and take good care of yourselves and of your students.